So I was checking my notes and I was like, crap, what did I have down for us today? I usually try to create an agenda for each of the weekly sessions. And this session, I was like, oh, yeah, how to schedule out meetings. Well, in management, you always have this problem where like every April and every like November, you suddenly find yourself just walking around the halls going from meeting to meeting to meeting because you didn't do a good job scheduling things out over the year.
Yeah.
And so you got to meet all the departments, or you got to meet with several people to do year-end reviews and all this other jazz, and you find yourself getting nothing done. And
Yep.
so
Yep.
I kind of wanted to go over an old topic we had from a while ago, which was staggering QBRs throughout the year
hmm
and staggering sessions so that you're not overwhelmed every year.
Well, and whichever way you want to go with this is perfectly fine. You just have to make sure that you go with it.
Yep.
So I don't know how many times I have sat down with clients, and some of you guys, we still got more folks joining here. Some of you guys, have probably done this as well. You sit down, and I make a joke of it. You sit down for your annual quarterly business review, right? I mean, you set out with the year and go, hey, we're going to have these QBRs, and you even get the client on board. And they're like, oh yeah, man, that'd be great. We'll get our VP of whatever in here, and we'll have a quarterly meeting. And then something comes up, something's on fire, somebody's on vacation, something's the report deadline coming up, and the meetings always get pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. And then you sit down and you look at this, and you if you're using our tools, which we hope you are, you've got a quarterly layout or whatever tool you're using. You sit down and you look at this and you go, all right, where's the quarterly update? Let's get this ready for the quarterly. And you look back and you go, crap, we haven't had a meeting in 9 months now.
Yeah.
And it derails everything you have going on if you don't be intentional about these meetings. I mean, they
Yeah.
have to be on whatever scheduling tool you're using. You have to get something out there and stick to them.
And I'm going to cover this later on in the lessons learned webinar this afternoon. So for whoever has not signed up for that, feel free to sign up. It's obviously virtual space, so we have plenty of seats. Uh, so the idea is that being consistent is one of the number one keys, and then two is just doing them. And you find out that the reason why lessons learned aren't done is because they're just not a priority. And one of the number one things that people ask me about running an IT department is, how do you get out of firefighting mode? All of our techs, our engineers are constantly bouncing from one thing to the next. And so they forget to do things. It's not that they're lazy, it's that they're working so hard, they're not getting
That's it,
things
exactly.
done.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to put out all these fires. And so what I say is, that's why the biggest failure of a lessons learned is you don't schedule it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you schedule it, even if it's 5 minutes, you're going to get ahead and you're going to stop the bleeding. Same thing with QBRs and annuals. The big thing is to have a schedule going so that every year you're running an annual, so you're staying on top of things. You do this little thing every day, then you're going to have less work down the road. If you ignore these things, you start working into time management debt.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually it's going to catch up with you. It's the same thing I talk about with technical debt. It still works when it comes to time management. If you do not manage your time appropriately, if you're not scheduling out QBRs and scheduling out touch base with your clients, something's going to pile up.
Yep.
You need to talk to these people, and if you're not talking to them on a regular basis, the list is going to get longer and longer, and some of these things are going to fall off, and then they're going to pop back up later when you least have time for them.
And that's that debt, talking about it like a debt is a really good analogy, because if you aren't having these meetings with your clients, you're going to have them. It's going to come up. It's either going to be a meeting that you're prepared for or a meeting that you're not prepared for. It's either going to be a meeting that you're leading and directing and you're focused on accomplishing positive things, or it's going to be a meeting where you're defending what's going on. You're in a firefighting mode and really trying to recover. And so, you need to get these meetings scheduled and running with them, because that debt mentality, or that debt analogy is I think very, very applicable in this situation.
Yeah, because you end up going all year, as you said, like a 9 month. If it's a small client, probably not a big deal. Like if it's a Class C client and you haven't
Yeah.
met in 9 months, not a big deal. But if this is a Class B client or Class A client where you're doing a lot of stuff for them, you just haven't have been able to get a hold of them, or you haven't been able to schedule time, but a ton of activities happened in the past 9 months, that meeting is going to be a doozy.
Yep.
Now,
It is.
there are some tricks to kind of help manage this. That's going to happen. But one is, if you met quarterly, at the very least every 90 days, to cover the big topics, the strategic items, then these meetings you have at the end of the year are much simpler because of
Yes.
two concepts. One is that you've been chipping away at that pile on a quarterly basis of things that need to be talked about. And then two, you've been setting expectations all year long. And
Yep.
I've had conversations like recently with coaching clients about how when you set an agenda and you send it out ahead of time and the client knows the expectations, then the meeting goes much smoother. There's less drive-by conversations. Hey, while you're here, or you
Mm-hmm.
have less time for the client to go, hey, let's talk about this thing. And so you end up talking about this one thing for the entire hour and you'll get any of your agenda done.
Yep.
And that's because you never sent out agenda ahead of time. And trust me, I am not an agenda guy. Anybody who knows Adam, I am not a checklist. I am not a ticket master. However, I do like to have boxes set around my time, and I like to have things available so that people understand that this time is allotted for these things.
Yep.
And if, as long as you can observe this framework of time, then we're going to be okay. But I also am a meeting Nazi. If we're in a meeting and you start getting off topic, which I'm really good at getting off topic, I will call and say, you know what, that's great. Let's get back. And so I'll try to circle it back to the actual conversation so they stay on task. And the client gets used to this, and they know that
Yep.
ahead of time when I send out that agenda, that it's really important for them to say, hey, can we also talk about Ben's laptop issues?
Yep.
And yeah, sure, let me add that on. It'll be during this section over here. And now they feel heard. And the conversations don't go all over the place, and you're covering what you need to. And if it turns out that there's a lot of things to cover, make it a 90-minute meeting.
Yep.
If you look at the strategic guides, there is a meeting agenda in there. So, you look over here, I do have a 60-minute meeting in here. I do have a 90-minute session in here. And so you just got to kind of think through, what is it that you need to do? Bigger clients, 90 minutes, shorter meetings can be 60 minutes. So the 60-minute agenda just is a SWAT meeting, like you have standard thing, but you can substitute in here topics. It's really easy to do.
Well, and this will help you focus on your target audience as well. So, this is another challenge that we face. We struggle getting in front of the right members of our customers. So, we may have a CFO or an office manager, and that's our primary point of contact. And so we talk to them all the time, but we want to talk with, their executive team, or at least, their CEO, a director of operations maybe, about something more business focused, more strategic. And we struggle getting those people in the meeting sometimes because so much of the meeting doesn't apply to them. So if you structure your agenda right, you can get the CEO in there. You can say, hey, we've got some topics we really need your input on. We need you to give us direction on how to steer this for your business. All right. The CEO is going to listen to those kind of phrases. All right. And then you send him the agenda and he looks us over and goes, oh, you guys need me for 20 minutes and then I can bail out. All right. Now, you've set the expectation for what you need him for, and you're much more likely to get him engaged in that meeting. And when you hit that agenda point and he's like, okay, you guys got what you need from me, great, he's engaged, he's happy, he's satisfied, and then he's out the door to do whatever else he needs to do. And the next time you ring him up and say, hey, we need to get you in a meeting, we need some stuff, he's going to be, cool, I'll be there. All right. So, it's a challenge sometimes to get this ball rolling, but if you'll stick with it, stick with these principles, make sure they're getting scheduled, get these agendas together, then your clients will get a feel for this. Hey, these guys got it down. They're organized. They're not just showing up and doing whatever. They've got a plan and they're working the plan, and you'll get a lot more traction with your clients.
Yeah. And so I also pulled up my quarterly meeting just here as an example of a good meeting agenda. But you're right. When you show this, when you run an orderly meeting, you attract quality people into those meetings.
Yep.
You don't want to be that person where the manager or the owner is just throwing an able body into the meeting, yes, because they know it's responsible. They need to have somebody in the meeting with you, but there's no real substance to the meeting, so they don't really want to be in it.
Yeah.
But when you have like an orderly meeting,
it's way too technical. Again, we'll hit this because we do it a lot. You throw a meeting together, it's way too technical. I mean, you're about 10 minutes in and you stop and look up, and everyone's eyes are just glossed over, or all you can see is the top of their head, because they're either sound asleep or they're banging away on their phone. And so you really have to target who you're talking to, because the last thing you want is the pre-meeting meeting at the customer site to be the employees drawing straws to see who gets the short straw, who has to have the meeting with the IT guy.
Yeah.
I mean, we can change that dynamic. We can spin that all around so that you actually have more people showing up for the meetings because they get something out of it. It's engaging. They're like, hey, I want to get in that. I got an opinion. You guys are getting stuff done. I want to get involved in this because they have some sort of business need and they need to communicate it. They'll show up.
Knowing that you have an agenda thrown out in front of them, the other thing it allows them to do is, if this is a key stakeholder at your client, they can say, hey, here's the agenda for the meeting tomorrow. Do you want to come to it?
Yes.
They might say, oh, I don't have the answers to those questions. Let me invite somebody who does know. So the meeting person can make sure that the right people are at the meeting. So if they know that this is the agenda, they're going to talk about the firewall upgrade, and it's going to affect the sales department, it's going to have downtime, and it's going to affect a large portion of the company, they're going to make sure that a couple of the more fluent or people who understand the company are in that meeting to say, okay, yeah, this works for us, this doesn't work for us. So having that stable agenda where you can talk about your projects and talk about how things are going, but at the same time, they know by looking at the meeting agenda, you put in, here's what we're going to talk about. Yeah. And then they can put their stuff in there. Now you've got a solid agenda. So when you're doing these annual activities, they see this meeting agenda come out saying, we're going to talk about how this last year went. We're going to, maybe throw lessons learned in there. Like, we're going to spend the first 15 minutes talking about what went well this year, what didn't go well this year, and what can we do to make things better for next year. That becomes something that, as a C-level, I want to be in that meeting.
That's right.
If this is going to be talking about the biggest thing that impacted our company over the past year, I want to be in that meeting. Now you're attracting in the decision makers. Most of the time when I meet with businesses, I'm usually invited in by a stakeholder, but then the CEO comes along. It's like, hey, we brought in Adam to talk about these things, talk through these things. And now I am in a meeting with a decision maker. And a lot of times in these meetings, MSPs want to be in these meetings with me, because when I'm making decisions in these meetings, it's like, okay, are we going to stay with the MSP or are we going to go to somebody else? Mm-hmm. Are we going to buy this $20,000 server, or are we going to sit off to the side, or are we going to go out to bid on it? These are meetings where we're making decisions that matter. And largely it's because when I walk in the door, the people know what I'm coming to talk about. I just ask them, what do you want to talk about? And then we make sure that a agenda is out and we're talking through it. That's how I attract people. That's how I keep my meetings concise. And that's how I keep them from like flowing over. The second thing that happens with these meetings, when you don't schedule them on a regular basis and you don't have a meeting agenda, is scope creep. So you have those like, hey, while you're here, can we talk about, can we talk about, can we talk about? You still have to get through this meeting agenda over here because it's the annual cycle. You still
Yep.
have to get through a SWOT session or a strategic session and talk about what next year looks like. But if you don't get through these things, you have to schedule another meeting. Now your one meeting became 2 meetings or 3 meetings. And so in this 1 week, you go back to the client a couple times, or over the next 2 weeks, you go a couple times when you could have done all in one meeting and followed up on their ancillary questions with a phone call. So while you're in the meeting, if somebody says, hey, can we talk about this right now? I'm like, it's not on the meeting agenda. We'll try to get it at the end if we can. If not, I'll schedule a call with you and write it down at that moment. Write it right down. That becomes an action item for the meeting. I even have a section over here for action items. Make sure that assign action items to individuals. I am going to call Bob and we're going to talk about his computer issues. And I can put it down here as something I'm going to follow up on, or I can open up the action item section and add it in here as a follow the Eisenhower matrices. There are little tools in here that are supposed to help you with the client. So the client says, okay, is this really urgent, or is this something that we need to deal with right now? If so, we'll make time in this meeting or at the very end of this meeting. If not, I will schedule time with you and we'll call back. So you can throw this right in the back behind you. And right in front of them is the Eisenhower matrix, taught in every business school in the nation.
Yep.
They don't get to argue with that.
Engages your clients in that. They realize, hey, we've got really important things to talk about. We've got things that are important but not important to the whole company. And yeah, I mean, that's a great opportunity to change your meetings from just a long bullet pointed list of stuff to things that are really matter, and your clients will respect that. They will really see that.
So be orderly. Go back to your meeting training. If you have never had any kind of time management training, formal time management training, these are key tools. Send out an agenda. Be consistent with your meetings. Like, for instance, if you're going to have a meeting, always have it the 3rd week of the quarter. Never different. It's always the 3rd week of the quarter. Everybody will know the 3rd week of the quarter on Thursday, we're meeting with Bob.
Yes.
And, when I have meetings with my clients, like I'll have a monthly meeting, they always know that it's the last Thursday of the month, or it's the first Monday of the month. And therefore, it's never in contention. And if we're not going to meet, if it's a holiday or something's going on, oh crap, I need to let Adam know that we're not meeting. It's on their calendar and they've got that time scheduled out. This helps them work it around all their other meetings. With year-end meetings, getting these in the last quarter, you're contending for time, because all these managers and these businesses are all trying to figure out how to get their year ends done. They're trying to figure out how to get a last push for their products. They're trying to do year-end employee reviews. They've got a lot going on.
Yep.
And depending on the industry that they're in, they may be just absolutely slammed. So you're going to make sure this meeting is high value. If you're talking about tickets in this meeting, you're losing. But if you talk about, hey, let's start off with the lessons learned. Let's talk about this last year. So how we can make next year a win. And then you're going to get their attention. Now we're going to also spend 15 minutes talking about what we're doing for you next year and how we're bringing you up to speed. And then we're going to answer any questions you have about what we can do for next year. So you do these things to gather information from them. They know that you're trying to get information from them and you're going to give them information. Now you have a conversation going and they're going to want to be there. Make sure it's planned out. And with all your clients, hit your A and B clients first, and then sprinkle in your C's where you feel like it's necessary. C's usually can wait until January. A lot of them fly by the seat of their pants anyways. And so having an annual meeting in January, February, not that big of a deal. If your client is $1 million or more a year, they're probably doing their budget pretty consistently.
Yeah, that's right.
So you want to hit them in October, ideally. Hit them in October, because that's when they're doing their budget planning and they'll finalize their budgets in November, December. And you want to be the first ask on there. So organize your clients by class A, B, and C. If you need